Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all. I'm the Director of Fine Arts in the Manchester School District. I'm really glad that you could join us at the Rex Theater tonight. It's a real gem in our city and an invaluable partner in elevating the arts in Manchester. So a heartfelt thank you, sincerely, to the theater staff of Rex and Palace and their leadership for hosting us once again our 4th year in a row, especially during this busy time of year. We booked this concert well before the Taco tour was, and street closures were booked. We win, but thank you very much for your patience in navigating that. I think that and the rain actually adds to the festive atmosphere in a way, and I'm a tortilla half full kind of guy, so I wanted you to know how much I appreciate you all for coming and your patience and dealing with that. Tonight is about jazz. Tonight is about students, musicianship, and it's about what becomes possible when a community believes in the power of public education. Jazz has a unique opportunity to unlock a student's creative voice, and that's something that we have long recognized here in Manchester. In fact, many of our own directors grew up in making their own musical memories in this city. And now a new generation of students is doing the same. So you'll hear performances tonight from 5 schools across the district, and each one showcasing their talent and hard work. But very excited to say this evening isn't just about what's happening on stage, it's about what's coming next. And so we have a very big announcement here tonight that this summer, I'm thrilled to tell you that the Manchester School District, in partnership with the Palace Theater, is launching the Manchester Summer Jazz Festival. It will take place August 7th through 9th, thanks to generous Title IV funding. We are proud to offer this to our students completely free. No cost, no barriers, just access and opportunity and high-level instruction. The festival is going to bring together guest artists, educators, professionals from across the area to work directly with Manchester public students. Over 3 days, we'll host workshops, rehearsals, concerts, and a street fair featuring student performers on a big outdoor stage on Hanover Street and right here at the Rex. It's going to be a really wonderful experience, and our public school students are absolutely deserving of that opportunity. So in the coming weeks, students, you're going to be able to sign up for this. We wanted you all to know, maybe mark your calendars now, we're welcoming vocalists and instrumentalists of all experience levels, whether you're a seasoned soloist or just curious. So we're very, very proud of that opportunity for our kids. And the festival is really more about, more than just a summer program. It's about what our schools can do, how we create spaces where equity, excellence, and creativity intersect. And that's alive really well here in Manchester, especially on a night like tonight where everything's busy. So let's give a big round of applause to our performers and their dedicated teachers. As well as for you, their families, friends, and supporters for continuing to champion music education in Manchester. So thank you. Let's get started with music. Kicking things off tonight is the Parkside Middle School Knights and their jazz band. And believe it or not, I have the honor of conducting them. So please check your program for song titles, performer names, and the full lineup for this evening. And we'll get started with the Parkside Knights. tenor saxophone, Kieran Carty. on the trumpet and Kieran on the tenor. Yes. And there's a soloist in the next piece. So, plus another one that we'll wait to the end to tell you their names because it's us on Cold Duck Time. I also want to point out some big kids that are joining us. The one and only West Side string extraordinaire, Mr. Noise on the bass. Thank you so much. And it's an honor to be conducting Nick Valentin again, who's a Central High School pianist. Here's the closer, Cold Duck Time. are 5 groups, so we're going to try to keep moving as quick as possible, but these are the little breaks between each group. And needless to say, there's more music coming.
Yeah, Damien!
Okay, this is Hillside Middle School Hawks. Their director. Hillside has been with us since we've been doing these jazz nights at the Rex, so they are no strangers to the stage, featuring what we call in jazz the wall of saxophones. Look at them, I can't count that high. Mr. Redmond and the Hillside Jazz Band. lot of soloists on that one. First, we had Logan and Anderson, and then we had Colin, and who was next? Annabelle, Tommy, and Brielle back there in the trombone section. And this additional tune called Down by the Riverside. Our next tune we have is a Charlie Parker tune. Who here knows who Charlie Parker is? Very hip crowd. Tacos and jazz. And rain. All right. It's called Now's the Time. Classic blues tune by Charlie Parker. It's going to feature 8 soloists. Buckle up.
Luke on guitar, Tommy on piano, Owen on trumpet, and Ash on tenor sax. All right, we have one more tune for you this evening, a Duke Ellington classic entitled Caravan. No, it's not the Whiplash version. Sorry. On trumpet, our trombone section, and the rest of the Hillside Jazz Band. Ready for more jazz? And once again, great job, Hillside Middle School. Next up, Westside Blue Knights, Miss Berger, Mr. Noise, and the Westside Jazz Band.
It's Never Over Till the Fat Lady Swings. It featured Amar Singh on keys in the solo section. Up next, we have a piece for you called Oasis that is going to have a solo by Salem on euphonium. I'd like to take a quick second and thank everybody involved for putting on this show, Mr. Doyle for setting it up, the people at the Palace for hosting, all of you all for the support that you give to your students and your kids on stage to make this all happen. We have one last tune for you called Knockout. It's going to feature 3 solos, one by Amar on keys, one by Salem on euphonium,
Let's hear it one more time for West High School. Memorial High School, you're next.
Good evening, my name is Tim Russell, and I'm the gentleman who's lucky enough to work with these fine students from Memorial High School. This is the Memorial High School Jazz Combo. Tonight you're going to hear everybody do a little bit of improvisation, so I'm going to give you names beforehand. On flute, we have Ethan Smith and Gwen Morrison. On trumpet, we have Dylan Cheney. On alto saxophone, we have Isaac Young. For percussionist, we have Gino Termini. And we have Parker Quintazis. Cool. And unfortunately, our piano player was sick today, but we are very lucky to have at Memorial High School Miss Michelle Jakes. She has joined us to share in our faculty, and she's going to play the part. Everybody good? Ready to go? Awesome. Our first tune is a Herbie Hancock tune called Watermelon Man. You might recognize it. tune is a Robert Beasley tune called Moon Gazer. And this one is going to feature Gwen, Ethan, and Isaac. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Memorial High School and all of the music teachers here, we'd like to thank everybody who helped put this together, the people from the Rex Theater, the people from the Palace Theater, Mr. Doyle for making this happen once again. This is just another great community event, and we're just lucky to kind of have it on a day where people are walking by and get to hear the music that we're playing. So it's a really great way to showcase the wonderful work that our students are doing. How about a round of applause for all of the kids that have performed so far? We're making a quick set change here. We have two drummers, obviously, and one is left-handed and one is right-handed. So we're just rearranging the drum set for a moment. Anybody got a good joke? I'm not good at the jokes.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
I don't know why.
I don't know either.
There you go. I got a good one. You want to hear a good knock-knock joke?
Yeah.
You start. Who's there? Aha, gotcha. I'll be here every Tuesday night. Cool. Our final tune is a Miles Davis tune entitled Milestone. You're going to hear Ethan, Dylan, Gwen, Isaac, and Parker will be our final soloists for the evening. We hope you enjoy Miles Davis's Milestones.
All right. We've come to the final band, and really proud of the students, the kids, the big kids too, the ones who pitch in, the teachers that are really dedicated here in Manchester, and we're all really proud of these students, and I think that really sets us apart. And I think these kids have just done a wonderful job. I just hope that you're as thrilled with how the night is going as I am. So let's just get on with it with this really awesome group behind me. David Bryan, Mr. David Bryan, and the Manchester Central High School Jazz Band.
Thank you very much. That's Lucas Astorino on alto saxophone. Elias Ramirez Vasquez on guitar. And Callie Peniston on trumpet. We're going to change gears a little bit. Oh, by the way, that was a tune called Morocco by the Rippingtons. Great arrangement by Gordon Goodwin. Fun tune. We're going to change gears now. We're going to move on. And we're going to feature Tommy Martineau on trombone performing Arthur Herzog Jr. and Billie Holiday, Jim. We hope you enjoy. God bless the child.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have one last tune for you again. Thank you so much to the Rex, to Ed Doyle for really spearheading this, and all of my colleagues for all the work that they did behind the scenes to put this together. Great way for us to share what all of our students do, and for our students to share with each other what we do in schools every single day. What a great life, right? A great life. So our final song is a good Buddy Rich way to end the show. We hope you enjoy Big Swing Face.